Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'm a physical therapist. I own Empower Physical Therapy. And just to kind of give you a little bit of my background, I have 4 degrees. I'm someone that loves to learn. I have my undergrad degree at SMU, and I have my master's in exercise physiology, my master's in physical therapy, and I finished my diploma in mechanical diagnosis and therapy, which is more a subset of physical therapy. Just it's kind of an evaluation process to kind of help get to the source of the problem pretty quickly. I'm also a collegiate athlete, so this topic is really near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to share my story at the end, but wanted to get started with some of the information. So if you're someone that gets sick before an event, or you're someone that is getting those nagging injuries, or you're someone that's just exhausted, like you're just tired all the time, your workouts aren't very good because of just fatigue, then this is a talk that you need to listen to, because that's where I was in my late 20s. And so what we're going to talk about is just kind of how lack of recovery leads to some of those injuries, but also to some of those health conditions that we get, or that we're seeing some of these athletes get into their 20s, like autoimmune diseases and cancers and different conditions like that. And so a lot of things that can also, not help us recover are things like stress. If you get a lot of stress and it's just that chronic stress, that also will not help. But also, overtraining and not resting and those kind of things. We know those things. But really what we're going to talk about more is from the nutritional side of things. Because if you can fix that foundation of nutrition, all of those other things that we talked about, the stress and the overtraining and the rest, all of those will get better. I mean, those are important as well, but we're going to talk about the foundation. So what happens when we don't recover? And ultimately what it is you end up overloading that tissue. And if you overload that tissue because it can't take that load anymore, because you're going from, one event to the next event to the next event, as far as, whether you're a runner or you're a soccer player or you're swimming, and you're constantly going. And if you don't recover, what happens is it overloads those tissues. And when you start overloading those tissues, you'll start noticing soreness, tightness, things that are lasting longer. You're just more tired, those kind of things. But that leads to injuries, and that leads to things like, if you overload a joint and it can't recover between bouts, that overload eventually changes the joint tissue to be more degenerative. That's just kind of what happens. But same thing happens with like our muscles and our tendons. So if you overload those muscles and you end up getting more of like a tendonitis that turns into a tendinopathy, which happens all the time with those overuse type injuries, that also becomes degenerative. And so you've got to get those fixed, but a lot of those things are because you're not recovering between whatever you're doing. And nutrition is a big component to that can really help with that. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So the way I like to talk about it, I'm going to talk more on the phytonutrients part of it, because that's really where a lot of our true healing happens. So if we just kind of just take a deep breath in and then exhale, we use that oxygen. We use it. And that oxygen, when we use it, produces little micro damages in our body. And those micro damages are called oxidative stress that leads to kind of free radical damage. But what happens is those accumulate over time. And when those accumulate over time, that's when we start having problems within our body. So maybe when we're younger, we don't notice it as much, but as you start getting older, that accumulation happens, and you start noticing nagging injuries, or you're getting sick, or you're getting more fatigued. These are all things that are happening because you're not recovering. And so ultimately, if you're an athlete, what do? We end up breathing in even more oxygen. A lot more oxygen, which produces even more damage to our body. So that makes us get to that process a lot quicker. And it's why we're seeing some of these athletes, have career-ending injuries, to having health conditions that are literally so serious that they're not able to play their sport anymore, and they're not doing well. And so the things that neutralize that oxidative stress is a thing called antioxidants. And the only place you get those antioxidants are from fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, things that come from the ground. That's where you get the antioxidants from. Those are the phytonutrients that we need so that we can reduce that stress that we're putting onto our body. And that's why those phytonutrients are so important. The other thing that I love to talk about that is just such a great analogy is the car analogy. And ultimately, you know, what we talked about was the gas, you know, in the car, and that gas is that macronutrition, which is what Kristen talked about, which is the protein and the carbohydrates and the fats, those kind of things. And so, you know, we can put anything into the gas tank and it can get us from, you know, point A to point B, and that would be like us. We can feed ourselves the calories that we need to get from point A to point B. But ultimately, if you don't fix the oil, like if you put bad oil in your car and you don't change your oil in your car, it doesn't matter how much gas you put into that car, that engine's going to eventually break and it's not going to work very well. And that's the same thing that happens to us is, you know, that oil for us is all those phytonutrients. That's that micronutrition that is so important. It's the phytonutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, and the only places, really the main places, the places that we get the bulk of that, it are fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains. That's where we get it from. And so that's why that micronutrition is so, so, so important. Now let's talk a little bit about you know, the whole idea of, you know, recovery and what we should eat like after we exercise. And you hear the whole things of, oh, we need all this protein. And just like Kristen said, protein is important, but not all protein is the same. And so we can look at, you know, the protein, you know, this whole craze of protein. I kind of equate it to like, you know, in the 80s, we had the whole thing of, oh, fat-free. It's the fat that's making us fat. So we need to have all fat-free stuff. Like that was the craze that's the media put out there. Well, I feel like that craze, which it actually made us fatter because they just put sugar in and took out the fats. And that's ultimately what they made fat-free things with. Well, they're doing the same thing with protein. They're saying, oh, protein. I mean, I don't know how many times. Well, where do you get your protein if you eat all these plants? Well, plant protein actually is great. It's phenomenal. You can get all your protein that you need from those plants. And animal protein actually, just like with whey protein, but animal protein actually is inflammatory to the body. And when you exercise, just like what Kristen said, you know, we use up those glycogen stores, and that's really, really important, which is the simple sugars that we need to exercise. After you exercise, you want to replenish the stores that you just did, those simple carbohydrates, the things that come from plants like the fruits and the vegetables are simple carbohydrates that you can put into your body really quickly so that it can actually start repairing itself with all the phytonutrients and things that you have that you need into your body. And so simple carbs is what I recommend with people eating after they exercise within 45 minutes of their exercise, because you're replenishing everything that you just lost. The other thing is that you want to do something that's not going to make the body work very hard. You've just exercised really hard, and you don't want to eat something that's going to make your body work hard to digest it because it's already exhausted. So that's, again, why you want to do things like smoothies and shakes, things like that, because it's already broken down. It gets into your system really quickly. You're getting protein and the carbs and the phytonutrients and everything that she said. That's exactly what you want. When you eat too much protein, animal protein, not plant protein, animal protein, it takes a lot for our body to digest that. And so doing that makes your body work harder, which is what we don't want. So that's one thing. The second thing is that in order for our body to break that down, it has to take a lot of our water from our system to break that down. Well, we're already dehydrated. So it can actually lead to like muscle cramps and things like that, because it's taking all this water from your system when you're already dehydrated to digest some of that protein. So it's also why you want to add, you want to go more to a plant-based protein source, which is what Kristen talked about. So one of the things that I recommend to my patients, because of me being an athlete, I wish I knew about this information when I was an athlete, is a product called Juice Plus. It's basically fruits and vegetables that have been juiced and dehydrated and put into capsules. So basically it's the pure oil that I was talking about. It's 30 different plants that you can get into your system every single day that's going to help with that recovery. And let me tell you, when I have my patients that are on this product or have been on this product for a while and then have had surgery and have come back in to see me, they do amazingly well. Like literally the doctor's like, how are you recovering so fast? This is pretty phenomenal. I mean, every single time it's pretty amazing. And so there's several reasons why I like this product. The first one is that it's just food. So it makes sense to me. It's food. It's just fruits and vegetables. The FDA regulates it just like food. It has a nutritional label on it, so it's not a supplement. And so it's something that can definitely be absorbed. The other thing that I like about it is that it's NSF certified. And the cool thing, like if you're an athlete or you're going into college or you're, going professional, whatever the case may be, they have an NSF certification, that's sports certification, that basically will test this product to make sure there's nothing that's in it that could be banned, essentially. And so there's so many times where you have that fear of, oh my gosh, you're taking something or it's an herb or something. You had no clue, because they don't always put things on the bottle of every single thing that's in it. And there could have been a banned substance in there. And that's really scary, because then you can get pulled from your sport. This does not have that, because it has that NSF sports certification. So that's also amazing for athletes. And then the last thing, and really the most important thing as a healthcare provider, it has science. It has good, solid research actually done in journals that I recognize, which is also pretty amazing. And I want to talk to you about one of them, and it's one of my favorite ones. There's several that are my favorite, but this one's really a pretty awesome one. And basically what they did is they took the elite Cobra Force. So this was in Austria, and they basically eat the same way. It's the elite force for their army. They eat the same way. They sleep the same amount of hours. They have the same amount of stress. They exercise the same. And so they basically took this group of people and they tested them before. They took their blood before and looked at their protein carbonyls. And basically protein carbonyls is just oxidative stress from exercising. So they were looking that before they exercised. They took baselines after they exercised, 30 minutes after they exercised, and 30 hours after they exercised. And so they got that baseline. And then literally 28 weeks later, so they had one group that was taking all three, fruit, vegetable, and vineyard, or the Juice Plus, and one group that wasn't. That took a placebo-like substance that looked and tasted and felt the same way, and tested them again at 28 weeks. And they went and looked at them before they exercised, again after, 30 minutes after, and 30 hours after. And the Juice Plus group, actually, their numbers actually went down just slightly, which is pretty phenomenal. I mean, they pretty much were consistent and even as far as that protein carbonyl damage. But the group that wasn't on Juice Plus, that took the placebo, their numbers were out the roof. And so literally, even after 30 hours after exercise, they still were not down to their baseline. And if you think that you're not down to your baseline of that protein damage that's happening from exercise, what's happening inside your body as you keep on going? That's when you're going to start having, that lack of recovery, getting sick, having injuries, nagging injuries, those kind of things. And so it's actually pretty phenomenal research. So that's the other reason why I just love and recommend this to all of my athletes. So I kind of want to share my story with you, because I had told you I was an athlete growing up. I was actually a competitive gymnast and made it almost all the way to the top, and also was playing soccer at the same time. So I literally, from probably the age 5, was training 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And then at about 6 or 7, started playing soccer on top of that. And so I was super active. At some point, had to make a decision and ended up choosing soccer. Went on to play college soccer for one of a top program in the United States, and played semi-professional soccer and got into marathon training. So super, super active. And by my late 20s, my body was exhausted. I was not recovering. I was having to figure out how I was going to train so that I could rest enough, so that I could push myself enough, because I wasn't recovering between my exercise bouts. I was getting sick all the time. Sinus infections and all sorts of stuff. And literally, like in a 1.5 year period of time, I had bronchitis, pneumonia, and cancer. And I dealt with my cancer for 2.5 years and 2 surgeries, and I couldn't do anything about it. I kept on asking the doctors, what I could do. I had a virus, so there was nothing they could do. They just said, oh, you're young, it'll go away. So there was no chemo, radiation, there was nothing. This is a virus. They can't do anything about it. So after about 2.5 years and 2 surgeries, and then went into a 3rd surgery, said, I'm done, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that's when one of my friends who I played soccer with at SMU, she was a nutritionist, and she kept on calling me and saying, you need to look at this, you need to look at this. And when I hit my low point, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to look at this. And I looked at the research and liked the fact that it was food, and took it. And 4 months later, everything was normal for the first time in 2.5 years. It was enough nutrition to allow my body to heal, and it was a catalyst for me to start making other changes and wanting to learn a little bit more. And as I learned more, I got more pissed off, because what I found was, and I see this with my patients and my friends, I find that the doctors get zero education in nutrition. They don't know, and the drugs are not going to fix a lot of the problems that we're having. They're just going to treat a lot of different symptoms. They're not going to get to the source, and the source is the foundation, and that's nutrition. That's where we need to start from and then go from there, and that's what we're not doing in our medical system. And so I had to find a way to integrate this into my PT practice, and I've been able to help more people beyond just physical therapy to really get their lives back, and that's why I do this. So I am done with my talk, and the next talk is going to be starting here shortly. It's going to be Catherine, and she's going to give us some amazing tips on how to make some foods that you can take on the go with you, because as we know, we're all super busy. I hope you guys enjoyed the information. If you have any questions or anything, just send some messages, and we'll answer them as we can get them. Thanks.